Monday, May 10th, 2026, we witnessed arguably the biggest call in the history of VAR in the Premier League. Of course, if you haven't seen it, I would be shocked. I'm referring to the equalizer for West Ham against Arsenal being called back in the 94th minute due to a foul on David Raya. Now, by no means am I surprised that this is a very spoken about topic. Of course, it is with such a crucial goal being pulled back, but the amount of people I've seen trying to say that this shouldn't have been disallowed is completely mind boggling. Now, of course, when we're talking about Arsenal, you have to be sensitive because a lot of people just do not like Arsenal. That's a fact. I mean, they're comfortably the most hated club in England. I think there's no doubt about that. However, it's not so much anyone who's going to try and claim that this was not a foul. You've completely lost the plot. Um, you know, Pablo, number 19, the attacker for West Ham, has put his arm across the chest of David Raya, and then with his left hand grabbed Raya's left arm, and we can only assume has held him down. We don't know that for sure because it's just slow motion video or pictures. Still images are not going to do that justice, but you can assume that he has certainly done something to impact David Raya's ability to catch the ball, which has been seen because Raya dropped it. David Raya is arguably the best goalkeeper in the world when it comes to claiming crosses. He does not, very rarely does he just drop a cross. So, kind of from the jump, I figured something had happened. But if anyone's going to try to claim to you that this is not a foul, that's completely ridiculous. There's absolutely a foul. There's two fouls on David Raya actually, because there's also I'm struggling to remember who the player was, but there was an attacker for West Ham who had a fistful of David Raya's jersey, pulling it. You will see it when you see the image, pulling him down about his jersey on his right shoulder. There is no doubt about it that that is a foul, and most people are willing to admit that. The issue is then that they all claim that Arsenal have done the same thing all season. That is completely ridiculous. There has not once been a goal for Arsenal that has seen a foul that egregious on a goalkeeper. The first instance they like to go to is opening day against Manchester United at Old Trafford. There's a group of players. Saliba is standing there with his right hand underneath the arm, the right elbow of Bayender, the Man United goalkeeper at that time. Now, let me be very clear. These two instances are not even close to being the same. David Raya is actively being hindered as he's trying to catch the ball. At the moment that the picture is taken with Saliba fouling Bayender, that cross has not even come in. Like, the corner's not been taken yet, or it's as it's being taken. That ball is not in the air. Bayender is not trying to make a play on the ball. There's also a massive difference between a player having his arm over the top of the goalkeeper's arm and holding the goalkeeper's arm at that, and having it underneath. Having his arm underneath the elbow of Bayender does not hinder his ability to come out and collect a cross. It doesn't do that. That's not how that works. He's not pulling his jersey down. He's not holding him underneath. He just has his arm underneath the player. So for you to try to tell me that those two instances are the same is completely ridiculous. David Raya is actively trying to catch the ball. He's completely refrained from, or he is withheld from being able to do that. He has his hands on the ball, and as he goes up, he cannot stick his hands together, clasp the ball, because his left arm is being hindered. Bayender, that is not the case. The ball is not anywhere near him when Saliba is making contact, and the contact Saliba makes does not hinder his ability to make a play on the ball. So, right off the bat, not the same instance. They also like to go to Emi Martinez trying to catch a ball, and Gabriel jumping up, and his elbow kind of comes against Martinez's arm. The difference there is that's a 50-50 ball. Now, not that the 50, like the West Ham players didn't have an opportunity to win the ball against Raya, but the two players that are fouling Raya have absolutely no chance to win that ball. One of them is behind him pulling his jersey, who has no chance to play the ball, and Pablo has his arm across, but he is never in any form of range scoring a goal there. He's not going to win the ball. Raya has both hands on the football. Whereas when Gabriel makes contact with Martinez, Gabriel is coming up. First off, when you go to head the ball, your arms come up. You're going to generate power by directing your header and moving your arms backward, right? That is a natural motion to win a header. So Gabriel's arm being there is a natural motion. He is actively trying to win a 50-50 ball that he is absolutely in the play for. And he contacts Martinez's left arm as he's trying to catch the ball. The reason this is different, like I said, is because Martinez has a right to the ball, but so does Gabriel. Whereas Raya has full rights to the ball, and the two players that foul him have no chance of winning that ball. They don't have the right to attack that. Well, they have the right to attack it, but they're not actively coming close to the ball. Therefore, they don't have a play to make on the ball, and because of that, it's a direct attempt to hinder the goalkeeper. Gabriel was trying to win the ball. And that's the big difference between that one and the one that we saw at the weekend. And then they also like to go to Chelsea versus Arsenal, the first Premier League game at Stamford Bridge this season. And this, I believe, 100% they have an argument here because we did foul, or maybe it was the second. I think it was the second game at the Emirates. We are all over Roberto Sanchez. The difference there is that Arsenal have shielded defenders into Sanchez. It's not an Arsenal player directly impacting Sanchez. It is us forcing a defender into the player. And I think that you want to argue if that should be allowed. Fair enough. There's an argument there. That I can't attest to because I think it is interesting that Arsenal have been allowed to kind of manipulate goalkeeper's ability to win the ball by using not fouling defenders into them, but forcing defenders to drive themselves into their goalkeepers. That's probably something that should be looked into, and there's not a whole lot of argument there. But this just isn't the same thing as what happened against West Ham because they made a deliberate and honestly an egregious hindrance of David Raya's ability to catch the ball. And to say this never happens just isn't true. It's quite a while back, but if you go back to 22-23, Ben White was called for a foul against Leicester because he fouled Peter Schmeichel. Or maybe it wasn't Peter Schmeichel back then, but he fouled the Leicester goalkeeper, and there was no doubt about it, and the goal was called off. So it does happen, and the instances that they're providing just aren't the same. And then that takes you to their last claim, which is that there was a foul on Declan Rice, where he held back Dinos Mavropanos. Absolutely. What Declan Rice did, penalty every day of the week. Here's the issue. Referees cannot call multiple fouls at a time. You cannot call the foul that is on David Raya, but then also give the foul from Declan Rice on Mavropanos. That's just not how that works. We all know this. You can only call one foul at a time. Say that even if the instances happen at the same time, which I believe the foul on Raya happens first, but if you want to say they happen at the same time, then the simple answer is that the ref has called the more egregious foul. He has looked at it, and the one that impacts the play far more is the one where the goalkeeper has his hands on the ball and he is pulled down by his shoulder and he can't catch the ball because a guy's got his hand on his left arm. That's the one that impacts the play more. There's actually an argument that Mavropanos never wins the ball anyway. He never has an opportunity to win the ball. Even without Rice fouling him, he never gets to that ball. If you think back to the quarterfinal of the Champions League last year when Arsenal played Real Madrid, Madrid won a penalty very early in that game. I believe it was either Rice or Saliba that had committed a foul against Kylian Mbappe on a free kick. And it was overturned because Mbappe was never going to get that ball whether he was fouled or not, whether he was held or not. So that is actively something that the Premier League focus on. If the player is not going to get to the ball, if there's no play to be made, then they let the hold go because it made no effect on the game, unless it's an egregious where it's like a full tug of the jersey, or he's pulled him down by his shoulders or something. So that is kind of a useless point that Rice is holding Mavropanos. Even if those fouls happen at the same time, you're always going to give the one on Raya because it's more egregious, and Mavropanos arguably is never going to get to that ball anyway. They even checked a foul on Rice, and they did not call it. And if you want to say the fouls happen at the same time, you should be calling the penalty for West Ham. Well, let's be really honest, because the very first foul that happens in that box is Thomas Souček dragging Kai Havertz to the floor, but we don't want to talk about that. So I think this whole thing is quite silly, and I don't really understand it because I've heard the phrase, I think it's a foul, but I don't like it. That's completely ridiculous. Just because it is not, now don't get me wrong, I think there's a massive issue of consistency of refereeing in the Premier League. I think it is horrific how often that you see decisions go one way and then the next game it goes a different way. I mean, it happens on Saturday it'll be a foul, Sunday it's not. It's ridiculous. However, that does not mean, just because, in your opinion, the Arsenal have committed fouls and scored goals and it's been allowed, that does not mean that when West Ham do it and they get called a foul, that does not mean that you get to be like, oh, it shouldn't be a foul. Because by the law, it's a foul, and you're acknowledging that by saying it's a foul. You can't then say, oh, well, it's a foul, but I don't like the call. That's not how that works. The letter of the law says it's a foul, therefore it can't not be a foul. You can never be mad that a correct call was made just because they've been missing bad calls all season. Now, when it's things that are 50-50, that the letter of the law is not abundantly clear on, when there's some gray area, like what is a red card and what is not, what is a dangerous tackle and what is not, when there's stuff like that, where it's called one way and called the other way, then you can be like, okay, well, if it was called a red here, it should be a red here, and if it wasn't a red here, it shouldn't be a red here. That's different. This, there's no doubt about it. This foul, there is no doubt that is a foul 10 times out of 10 according to the letter of the law. There is no way that anybody can watch that clip and tell me David Raya is not fouled. So when it's black and white, when it's very obvious that David Raya is fouled, you cannot tell me that you would rather see it not called, because that it would not be upholding the integrity of the game. That's that simple. You cannot say, I don't like it because Arsenal have gotten away with the same thing, which, again, I've already explained that they have not been doing the same thing at all this season, that you can't then say it shouldn't be a foul when it's clear as day, written in the rules of the game, that is a foul every single time. If it had been the other way, and Arsenal had scored a goal like that and it had been called off, there would not be a single rival fan complaining that should have stood, or it shouldn't have been called back. Everyone would be screaming that that's a foul, because it is. And I would be standing right here admitting that's a foul. I've done it multiple times this season. That is a foul 10 times out of 10. And I could not believe the reaction from certain people. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious when every commentator on the call said 100% that's a foul. Every pundit afterward has said it was a foul. The only two that I've seen not said, Wayne Rooney said it wasn't. It shouldn't have been given. It should have been given, and it was kind of along the lines of Arsenal have been doing it all season. It's too big of a moment to interfere, but too big of a moment. I don't care how big the moment is. You cannot allow a goal that is certainly not illegal. Like it is such an appalling decision from Pablo to actually do that to the goalkeeper as he's trying to catch the ball. If David Raya is not hindered, he catches the ball 10 times out of 10. He had both hands on it, and he falls back with his shoulder being pulled and his left arm, he can't move it. It is you were never going to get away with that. And the fact that there are people defending that as a goal, saying that it should stand, is completely ridiculous. You are either so against Arsenal that you would rather see the law of the game not be upheld just to spite them, or you're being completely moronic and delusional. There's no in between. This is a foul every single time. Every single time. There's no doubt about it. And so again, I am not surprised in the slightest that there's an outrage and that they're going to make this look like a controversial decision that's gone in favor of Arsenal. But even if that was the case, even if it was slightly controversial and Arsenal had been bailed out, how about we sit and recap the times that Arsenal have not been bailed out? How about we go back and look at 22-23 when Manchester City had Kovacic almost break Martin Odegaard's leg, gets a yellow card on a tackle that was certainly a red card. 4 minutes later, he does the exact same thing to Declan Rice, is not given a second yellow card, then puts in another tackle that's worthy of a yellow card, is not sent off still. No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about Bruno Guimaraes elbow to Jorginho's head, the back of Jorginho's head. No red card given. No one wants to talk about Bukayo Saka going to clear the ball and a player for Crystal Palace kicking straight through the back of him. No red card given. No one wants to talk about Miles Lewis-Skelly last season against Wolves putting in the most normal tackle you've ever seen, the most obvious yellow card tackle you've ever seen, and being sent off. No one wants to talk about Arsenal having a goal disallowed against Manchester United in 22-23 for a foul that was absolutely the wrong decision. It was never a foul on Martin Odegaard before Martinelli eventually went on to score. No one wants to remember Brentford scoring an equalizer in 21-22 because the VAR team did not draw the lines. They didn't draw the lines. They did not do their job. There's a plethora of instances when Arsenal, don't even get me started on the Declan Rice red card against Brighton, the red card for Leandro Trossard against Manchester City, both for kicking the ball away. When this rule was introduced, there was only 4 players that received yellow cards for him. 3 of them were Arsenal players, and 2 of them were second yellow cards. The refs have been against Arsenal on far more occasions than they have been for them. I'll take you all the way back to 2020 when David Luiz was sent off because William Jose was through on goal for Wolves and his studs clipped Luiz's knee and David Luiz was sent off with a red card and they gave a penalty to Wolves. There is a plethora of instances where Arsenal have not been bailed out. They've been, for a lack of better term, they've been screwed by the officiating in the Premier League for so long. I mean, there's an abundance of things. Tariko Tomiyasu had his face stepped on by Ben Godfrey, no red card. Kai Havertz last year had fallen over and the defender stuck his hand around Kai Havertz's throat, and there was no red card. Gabriel Jesus was assaulted. He was bending over to tie his shoe, and a guy came up and grabbed him by his butt. No yellow card. I mean, the things that I've seen go against Arsenal in the Premier League in the last 5 years, if this is the one that bails them out, so be it. They've earned the right for one decision. How many times, think back to Jeremy Doku kicking Alexis McAllister in the middle of his stomach, inside the box, and that not being given as a penalty for Liverpool. Think back to Rodri's handball against Everton a few years ago where his arm is out here and he's knocked the ball to the floor, and that's not been given. There are few instances where Arsenal have been bailed out. Maybe this is one of them. I'll give you Odegaard against Liverpool for that handball in the box. That was egregious. I could not believe that was not given as a penalty. And you can have... That's about it. Like, that's the only instance I can think off the top of my head where Arsenal have then Gabriel should have been sent off this season against Man City for his headbutt on Erling Haaland. That was absolutely a red card. I could not believe he stayed on the pitch. So there have been instances a couple of times, yes, where Arsenal have been on the beneficiary of poor officiating. But the amount of bad calls against Arsenal to the good calls for Arsenal is ridiculous. I mean, it is a very, very long line of things that have not gone their way. And I think there are other clubs that can say this. I think Man United in the last few years have had a lot of really strange calls against them. I think Liverpool certainly, especially if you look back at 22-23, had a ridiculous amount of decisions go against them. The instance against Tottenham Hotspur, where they were absolutely onside and the refs confirmed the wrong decision and the goal was taken away. So it just, to me, feels like it's really rich from Man City fans being the ones to complain about this when you have 115 financial fair play charges and you have been bailed out by refs consistently for years. We won't talk about the Brentford game at the weekend. That you can certainly argue that there should have been a Man City player sent off. We won't talk about the one against Arsenal when Kusanov takes down Kai Havertz with no intention to play the ball while he's through on goal and that not being given as a red card. It's fine. Like, there are so many instances of Man City being the beneficiary from officiating decisions that if this is the one that Arsenal get away with and that brings them the Premier League title, fair enough. It is a long time coming that they've had something go their way. And again, this is not something that I even think is questionable. I think this is nailed on 10 out of 10, the most obvious decision There's no doubt about it that that is a foul. 10 times out of 10. And so if you're going to complain and you're going to tell me that Arsenal are Varsenal and that they've gotten bailed out by the refs again, I couldn't believe I was seeing the word again at the end of that sentence. This is a no doubt, like, no doubt about it. Arsenal deserve a decision to go their way, and this isn't even that. This is a stone cold foul every single time because you cannot do that to a goalkeeper. You can't. It's that simple. You had Spurs fans admittingly, they probably just want West Ham to lose, but you had Spurs fans admitting that this is a foul 10 times out of 10. It is ridiculous to insinuate that this is either not a foul or that it shouldn't have been called so. It's that simple. It is a foul 10 times out of 10, and Arsenal haven't gotten away with one here. The simple fact is West Ham committed a foul, Arsenal conceded because of that, and the goal was correctly overturned. That's where that ends. So, 2 games to go for Arsenal. I think 3 games to go for Man City. Big week here. Palace go to the Etihad, I believe, I think tomorrow. And then Arsenal play Burnley on Monday, Bournemouth, Man City on Tuesday. Those 3 games could be the deciding. If not, we go to Palace versus Arsenal and Villa versus Manchester City. I expect both the non-title challenging sides that week, the final week, to rotate their squads because they're both playing in European finals. So I'd say that was the biggest hurdle for Arsenal, was getting past West Ham, and they made it harder on themselves than it needed to be. That is a completely different discussion, but Arsenal looked to be in the driver's seat, and if you want to say that came from a poor decision, I think you're lying to yourself. So we will see how this all shakes out, but the whole point here is that this was a foul on Donnarumma. This was the correct decision from the VAR, and Mikel Arteta said it. I rate the boldness and the willingness to correct it as such a massive decision from VAR. If this had been in the say Man City had conceded a late equalizer against Palace tomorrow, say they do that tomorrow, I will be sitting here telling you the exact same thing. If it was the exact same foul, I would be telling you that is a foul against Gianluigi Donnarumma every day of the week. And I respect the boldness because a lot of times, you watched it against Atletico Madrid and Arsenal in the semifinal of the first leg, referees will be influenced in big moments. It is, the home fans were loud. West Ham did not want to see that goal called back. It meant that they lost the chance to stay up. It was taken out of their hands. And the boldness to go and make sure you got the right call, really well done. The officials did a great job in that moment. It's just a shame that they cannot do this every week. And again, I do not believe that there is a consistency in this refereeing. The refereeing in the Premier League is appalling. It's really, really bad. But they've gotten this one right, and you cannot negate that because they've made so many wrong decisions. A right decision is a right decision, and the referees got this one right.